Wonder Egg Priority is a surreal masterpiece, or at the very least the show is quickly shaping to be that way. This story is about a girl named Ai Oto. Following the suicide of her best and only friend Koito Nagase, she encounters an entity that gives her a chance to possibly bring her back through a system based around Wonder Eggs, which I will talk about more later. This show was animated by Cloverworks, the same studio behind Darling in the Franxx, Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, Promised Neverland, and other well-received anime. Personally, I've just got back into anime myself, and this show has solidified my interest in the genre once more. There is so much I want to talk about with this show, but before that, allow me to put a trigger warning, as this show covers topics of suicide and other traumatic experiences. Also, to be safe, I will put a spoiler warning here up to episode 9. First off, allow me to praise the extraordinary art style of this show. At times, it's absolutely breathtaking with its sharp and vibrant colors and details. Plenty of the scenes I found myself often forgetting that this is just a show and not a feature film, as the quality is often on par with higher budget movies. In certain scenes, it even looks like Cloverworks used photography of the real world and applied a watercolor filter on top, which gave a beautiful contrast to the designs of the characters. Not to say that the characters themselves have poor designs, no, it's actually quite the opposite. Each of the characters have extremely well-made designs that are distinct from each other and are largely representative of their personalities and character traits. Ai is usually seen wearing a yellow hoodie with a sunflower in the center. The color yellow can represent her shyness and cowardice she experiences before and during the beginning of the show, while the hoodie itself is usually shown to represent someone in their youth. The sunflower is also such an important part of her design, as the sunflower generally represents loyalty or adoration. Two feelings Ai strongly feels about Koito, who is her driving force and motivation throughout the show. Neru has the flattest color scheme of the main cast, with gray being the predominant color of her design. However, that is not to say that her design is not expressive of her character. Gray is generally a color used to represent dullness and formality, which easily represents her cynical outlook on life as well as her position as president of her own company, while the bow, ribbon, and side ponytail are reminders of her still being a child. Rika has the most vibrant color scheme of the bunch, and you can see right away that she is a delinquent, sporting a red and purple Letterman jacket and having blonde dyed hair with a single pink highlight. While red in art generally has a whole load of meanings, purple is often used to represent royalty and independence, which is especially in line with how she places herself on top of a high pedestal. Momoe is a girl who is most seen in a navy blue sweater with beige slacks, and while you might think that the only important thing to her character's appearance is how she's androgynous, I also want to talk about the specific color scheme they gave her. Blue is often associated with sadness in the media, but the color blue can also represent softness, compassion, and caring, features that Momoe predominantly shows. This one also might be a bit of a stretch, but while beige can have other meanings, it is generally seen as a neutral color, which can be tied back to her androgynous features. But alongside these beautiful visuals, the show's sound design is also extremely well done. Each sound effect is snappy and sharp without ever being distracting or completely meaningless. And on top of that, the OST is also well done and extremely diverse. No two tracks sound exactly the same, and the music often dips into different genres and styles to get the most expression from each. From softer tracks with layered pianos paired with marimbas for calmer scenes, to energetic tracks that utilize EDM that provide upbeat tempos for more cheerful scenes or moments of emotional turning points. In fact, I am actually listening to the soundtrack as I write this script because it's so good. But even with both of these amazing aspects, what truly stood out to me was the latent symbolism in the show and how I interpreted the meaning behind them. A huge part of this show is dealing with and understanding suicide, a topic I am all too familiar with. According to SAVE, or the Suicide Awareness and Voices of Education, approximately 800,000 people commit suicide each year, which amounts to one person taking their own life approximately every 40 seconds. This number doesn't even account for those who have only attempted suicide and have survived the ordeal. According to the CDC from a study conducted in 2015, in the United States alone, 1.3 million adults had attempted suicide that year, and Japan itself has been known to have high suicide rates since the Asian financial crisis in 1997, which thankfully has seen a decline in recent years. Each of the main characters has been affected by the suicide of someone they were close to, whether it was a family member or a close friend. Each of these characters regret the loss of that person and in some way feels some responsibility for that person's death. Suicide is like throwing a stone into a pond. While the stone may sink to the bottom, it leaves ripples on the surface. It affects everyone around them, even those who they least expect to care. These characters themselves are bearers of the burdens left by their person. People who care enough and are desperate enough to risk everything to bring that person back. Now earlier I said I'd go over the Wonder Eggs. In this universe, when a girl commits suicide, it's possible for their soul and trauma to be placed into a special kind of egg, which can be broken to release the soul and trauma in the dreams of the main characters, or the egg world as it's called. I think the form of an egg is such an ingenious idea for this concept. A prominent idiom in English-speaking countries is for someone to come out of or break their own shell. This idiom at its simplest means for someone to remove one's inhibitions, and while a majority of the time the shell represents someone's innate shyness, it can also equally be compared to one's trauma, where breaking the shell is to overcome that trauma. However, with how the show represents these Wonder Egg girls, it conveys that it's hard to overcome one's psychological issues. Many people who suffer with psychological trauma and/or depression feel as if they've been isolated or segregated from the rest of society, and if left untreated or unmonitored can slowly build up until the victim is pushed into a corner, until only one option seems viable to them. Another point of symbolism in this show is the rampant group of enemies known as See No Evils. And while the name may be a bit on the nose, it's clear these enemies represent the people who would knowingly ignore people with these issues. It shows us the harsh truth about feigning ignorance, that knowingly ignoring someone who is going through these struggles can cause as much damage as being the one who directly inflicted the trauma in the first place. But there is one important piece of symbolism I noticed about Wonder Eggs that generally gets brushed over past the second episode. One detail I think means so much yet is glossed over so quickly, and that is the fact that someone else cracks the shell for these characters. By default, when you hear the saying that someone has to break out of their shell, it's assumed that they must do it themselves. However, the most powerful message this show has given me, and I hope many others, is that we as individuals have the ability to help those who are in need. I know from my experience that it's difficult to reach out when you are depressed. So this message of reaching out to those who are troubled, even if you don't know them personally, is so powerful to me. The way this anime portrays that idea is so fantastical, taking the ideas that our past traumas can grow to monstrous sizes, so much so that they manifest as actual monsters, to the idea that someone who is willing to help us would be strong enough to challenge and defeat those traumas with us. I don't hesitate when I say that this show has an oddly macabre beauty. It doesn't glorify death in the slightest. In fact, we never see any of the victims take their lives, and even past their deaths, these characters are still vibrant and colorful, full of their own unique personalities. Generally speaking as well, most of the Wonder Killer's deaths are off-screen, and while I could be reaching again, it could be seen as respect for those who've passed on, as death on screen can be seen as glorifying, especially if the character who dies is disliked. We see the effects of suicide on each of these characters, the desperation it causes them, but within their pain we get to see these characters grow and change. These characters who eventually become united due to a shared circumstance. It's important that we must keep moving forward, but we cannot forget those who have made us who we were. And ultimately, Wonder Egg Priority captures that concept perfectly, and in my opinion is an absolute masterpiece. Thank you so much for watching to the very end. You're the real MVP. But if you want to be a super MVP, please hit the like button and subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't already. I'm trying to close in on my current goal of 1K subs, and every little bit of support helps. With that, have a wonderful day.